Talk about the first round, Dan. And obviously, the first round of these drafts is very important. You want to nail your first round pick, especially in these category leagues, because the first round kind of determines how the rest of your draft is going to go. This is essentially the building block and the framework for how you're going to build your team. If you're going to like fade any categories, if you're going to build on a certain category, or if you're just going to have a pretty good overall team. So, my man, Dan Titus, bro, talk to me, man. How you been living? How was this offseason for you?
Oh, offseason has been great, man. And we're only like 12 days away from actual hoops. So, like, I couldn't be more hyped, man. Doing a lot of content, been watching a lot of games, reading a lot of box scores, listening to the beat. You know what I'm saying? Like, this is where this all kind of comes together. So, if you get the number one pick, come on. Which way are we going? We got to go Wemby, right?
Gotta go Wemby, bro. I think the number one pick is probably one of like the biggest things, right? Because you have to take either the risk of Wemby or you go one of the floors and maybe Jokic, maybe you're looking like, Shea. I don't know who else you're looking at. But Wemby to me seems like the guy. Like when you talk about potential ceiling here, there is no ceiling. No ceilings, like Wayne said, right? Like there's literally no ceilings. And the defensive stats, especially in category leagues, you're talking about a guy that's going to average 3 blocks a game at least. I mean, he just it completely dominates in one category and gives you such a good floor in the others.
So the thing about Wembanyama and why I like him as the number one pick is because you want to play fantasy basketball and all fantasy sports for upside, right? And it's also fun. Let's keep that in perspective, right? When you go to your box score and you want to look at your fantasy team, you want to see the most craziest stats that have ever been produced. And that's what you're going to look like when you see Victor Wembanyama, right? This man he was like what, 1 rebound and 2 assists shy of a quadruple double. Only Hakeem Olajuwon has done that. If you look at his numbers, he had the second most fantasy points in the modern era for a rookie, only behind David Robinson. And for you young heads that don't know who David Robinson, the Admiral, was, this man was like, if he played in the NBA today, it would be like Wemby, only Wemby can shoot threes too. This guy averaged like 4 stocks a game. So if we're talking about a guy that can get steals, over 3.5 blocks a game, he's going to be a 20 and 10 guy. He's already been the odds-on favorite for most improved player. I don't even know how he even qualifies for that in his second season. But Victor Wembanyama, to me, is like, he's a cheat code. He's a cheat code for fantasy. So if you have an opportunity to draft a cheat code, do it. And that's not a knock on Jokic, man. Like Jokic has been a top 3 player over the last 4 or 5 seasons in fantasy basketball. So it's really a win-win situation. But when you're talking about winning a league, you got to go for this upside. And Wemby pretty much covers every base in fantasy. Turnovers might, hamper him a little bit, but who cares about turnovers? And his field goal percentage might be a little bit light on some nights. But if you're looking in totality, this man's going to help you in 7 of 9 categories.
It's funny because you talk about like cheat code, and Jokic is a fucking cheat code. Like he's a cheat code at center, and we get even more of a cheat code in Wembanyama, which is crazy. Like you're talking about, like Jokic averages damn near a triple double at center, right? So when you get that kind of assist and production from a unique spot, I always talk about this. Like the outliers, they kind of lead the teams, right? Like I feel like if you can get assist at center, you have an advantage. You get rebounds at the point guard position, you have the advantage. And I think Wemby just provides like these stocks, these crazy amount of stocks that like kind of change how you address these category positions. Because, there used to be, I don't know, you obviously remember, but if you're watching, maybe you don't remember, Hassan Whiteside had this stretch for the Miami Heat in the second half of the year where he was averaging like 4 blocks a game. And literally, you didn't have to have a single block on your team because he was having, 30 blocks in a week, 40 blocks in a week at time. And you were like, that's the only player you need. And you can address every other position now without having to go with blocks, every other category. Wemby's going to be the same way. You get one more player who averages a block or 2, you're pretty much covered. So I just think the statistical advantage that he provides is even better than like a Jokic who, Dan, I really like Jokic at the number 1 spot. Yeah. And I feel like he provides a lot assist-wise and steal-wise for a big. It's just crazy to see what we're going to get out of Wemby this year. I do think, though, Jokic is safer. He's safer right now than Wemby is. I think injury risk-wise.
Jokic has the highest floor in the game. And I say that because if you just go into, look at the advanced stats, look at the actual box scores, this man he doesn't miss games very frequently. And which is a positive for Wembanyama that he played over 70 games, that he played 70 games in his rookie season. But if you look at Jokic, I mean, you can build anything. You can build a team around him because he doesn't do anything bad. The only thing he doesn't do is block shots. But steals, he's right there. Gets over steal a game. He's going to average a triple-double. He has 114 triple-doubles since 2019. Like, this man is a stat stuffing machine. So you can't really go wrong. And to be honest, I think you're actually probably getting the best valued pick at number 2 if someone takes Wemby, right? You're going to get Jokic as the number 2 when this guy is a perennial finishes top 3. Like, it's just so crazy how good the center position is in fantasy. And we can talk about a couple other players, because I think there's a couple of situations where I think there's a couple of centers that could probably compete for a top 3 position just because of their situation and the way that the kind of landscape is shaping out. But centers are more valuable than ever in fantasy basketball. And it speaks to it because the first 2 picks are literally centers.
It's like, well, we got like 5-6 players that are center eligible in the top 12. And it's like, normally, you talked about this last year. You kind of like fade the center position a little bit, and you go for the point guards, you go for the guys that can get you assists. Assists to me has always been one of those categories, Dan, that like, if you get that, it feels like you have an edge on everybody else, because assists are like, you can't pick that up late in the year.
They're
you
so
pick up
constant.
scoring, you pick up threes. You can't always pick up assists though.
The top guards in fantasy basketball are also concentrated at the top, 3-4 rounds, right? So that's why, like, my draft strategy has always been go get guards early, second, third round. But like, when you have the opportunity to pair them with a Wembanyama, a Jokic, a Giannis, an Embiid, an Anthony Davis, etc., you're just getting so much more statistical broadening of your like categories when you can like pair them with those guys. And I think you made a great point. It was like, you got to get those players that have the upside in other positional areas where they don't normally get those stats. So Wembanyama is probably going to average like 5 assists this year. That's like Sengun, Sabonis, Jokic. There's not that many centers you can get 5 assists from. So anytime you can get a player that can contribute in an area where, is a strength, usually a deficient area of another type of position, you got to do it.
What about Shai or like Luka, right? Like, we obviously talked about the centers being at the top here, but like, is that even a consideration for you at number 1? Because when you talk number 1, like, we know the outlier that Wemby is, we know the outlier that Jokic is, but like, Luka is an outlier himself. He's probably going to lead the leading scoring again, damn near probably average a triple-double this year or be close to it. And then same thing goes with Shai. It's like, he's one of the more consistent players. It's elite in steals. Neither of those guys is a threat to like the number 1 spot over Jokic or Wemby for you right now.
No, I think Luka could probably be a close. He's in that next tier, right? Like, I think I would take, if my draft board was coming up to me, it would be Wemby, Jokic, then Luka. The one thing about Luka that I think is actually looking up for him this year is that they got better perimeter shooting that could equate to more potential assists. Maybe it's a little bit less load on him, offensively, but either way, this dude's going to be getting 30%, highest usage rate in the league, damn near. But when you have a spot up shooter like Klay Thompson, you bring in Najee Marshall, you bring in Quentin Grimes on top of PJ Washington, man, like, Dallas Mavericks are going to be a really good basketball team, and Luka's going to put up. He was already efficient last year, so if he can continue that efficiency, that was always the knock on him, and that boost and assist with that perimeter shooting around him is only going to be a good thing. I do have concerns about SGA though, because
really
they got better. They got a lot better. I mean, defensively, this team is going to be a nightmare, but they added in when they got rid of Josh Giddey, they brought in Alex Caruso, definitely a defensive-minded guy. But I think Jalen Williams is going to take that next step and evolve from being a really good player to being an all-star caliber, maybe even all-NBA type of talent. So I think his usage is actually going to go down a little bit. Chet Holmgren's going to grow and get more mature in his role, playing a little bit of 4 now with Isaiah Hartenstein there. This Oklahoma City team is for real, and I think that they're going to be spreading their usage among their starting cast, and that might downgrade Shai just a little bit to what we've seen in the past, where he's been an MVP caliber player, and I think the NBA GMs voted him as the most likely to be MVP this year. But I would take Luka over him.
Well, he's a dog, and that whole team full of dogs, and so we know they be barking, especially in playoff pictures. But I feel like there's the novelty, right, factor of the triple-double with Luka, with Shai kind of potentially being. I know Shai's a little bit further away from the triple-double than Luka is, but there's that novelty factor of like they average 30 points. And in category leagues, that's the one thing I'll say about these two players is I think some of their pull up to the top of this number 1, number 2 spot is due to the fact that they go so high in points league. So I kind of stay away from players like Luka who are a drag in like free throw percentage and turnovers. And in the second half, Luka was much better shooting the free throws. So hopefully we get to see that stick. But I kind of stay away from players that don't shoot free throws well, or maybe they're averaging around 4 turnovers. Unless you're Wemby. Wemby gets the pass, bro. He gets the pass.
He gets a pass.
Who do you think's the most underrated pick in the first round, right? Like there's a few candidates towards the back end of the first that fluctuate. We're not getting the same players, but obviously the middle of the first round is probably going to provide somebody that finishes in the top 3, top 5 that we're just not expecting, right? And for me, like when I look at a guy like Tyrese Halliburton, a player who we're taking, an efficient player, we're taking at this rate, he's kind of bumped down to the back end now of the first round. And surprisingly for me, because I think things are going to open up here. The Pacers were playing really well, hit the Eastern Conference Finals last year. And he was going through, I think it's easy to forget, he was going through that injury that he was forced to play through to try to make all those, the all NBA and everything he was trying to make. And he played through it. He played bad through it. And that's not the Tyrese Halliburton we're used to seeing. If we get a full 82 or full closer to 75 out of Halliburton and it's all 100%, I mean, this is a guy that I think we're top 5. He's efficient, hits 3-ball, going to be top of the board when it comes to assists. One of the most underrated players to me. I don't know how he's slipping this far in drafts.
I think it's because of Pascal Siakam, and you know what I'm saying, like this Indiana offense, like definitely one of the fastest paced teams in the league. And I think we saw a mini breakout in Tyrese Halliburton last year, first time All-Star, averaged 20 and 10. Only a handful of players did that from the point guard position. But health is a factor here. And this is why, like, I think if you're drafting, you want to have picks 1 through 4, because 5 through the back end of the first round, it's a toss-up. There's injury risk all over the board. And as you said, I think Halliburton's fantasy stats definitely suffered last year because he was playing through injury, because he was trying to get, the all-star team, the all NBA, so it would boost his contract value and his net worth. So, I'm saying, like, that's just the new phase of the NBA. There's going to be players playing through injuries because they want to have they want to reach those accolades or those milestones within their contract to get paid more. But I do think this slide is actually probably an overcorrection. Right now, he's, I believe his ADP is 8th. That's crazy. Like, I mean, I'll take a 20 and 10 guy that's very efficient and gets steals number 8, right? Like, I'll take him over Jason Tatum, whose ADP is right around the same place. So I think this slide is probably an overcorrection just due to his injuries. But if you can get Tyrese Halliburton at 8, that's a W.
Yeah, I feel like this is one of the things about this first round, right? Like there's just a lot of talent, and we've seen star power kind of go throughout, right? We haven't even touched on some of the best players in the league yet in fantasy, and even guys that probably could be in this first round discussion. And we're here talking about pick number 8, getting Halliburton as a steal. So I think it just speaks a lot to the star power that's available this year in fantasy. And, I think when you're building, especially when it comes to these category leagues, I talked about the outliers, but I don't know about you. I always find that one of the hardest stats to find late in the year, or maybe I should say this a different way, one of the easiest stats to find because everybody else avoids it, is steals. It's like the defensive stats, blocks for whatever reason, is easily like, okay, this guy blocks a lot of shots. But I think steals are undervalued, and Tyrese Halliburton is always amongst the league leader in steals too. For an efficient guy, that turnovers is another one of those stats where people kind of ignore it. Like steals and turnovers, he's elite in both of those categories for the production that he has.
Yeah, I think if you're going into your drafts trying to chase blocks, like that's like this the wrong strategy, because blocks are so variable, right? Like you can have a guy that goes for 1.5 blocks. Look at Rudy Gobert. 2 years ago, he went down from 2.5 blocks a game to 1.5. And it's like, bro, that just dropped his stock by like 2 or 3 rounds just off of that. The way that the model or the algorithm that's used to make these rankings just prioritizes steals and blocks so much higher. So that variance is so hard to predict year over year. But with steals, though, you can at least look at deflections. You can kind of see some trends in data that looks like, all right, was this guy actually a good defender? Is he in the passing lanes? Is he active? That's why I always go for the guards early on, because you're shoring up your points, potentially your threes, your free throw percentage, and your steals. Getting that early in the drafts, that's not going to be available as you get further along. You can get rebound blocks later. Get those guards now. So you're talking about Tyrese Halliburton. There's a very good chance you can be able to pair up Tyrese Halliburton with James Harden in the second round, with LaMelo Ball in the second round, Fred VanVleet maybe in the third round. You're just looking good at that point. You know what I'm saying? From like a foundational base, and then you can go heavy on the bigs as the draft goes on. So yeah, I'm definitely a firm believer in getting the guys that get the steals, threes, assists, points, which are all tend to be point guards.
Yeah, I talked about obviously my point guard. I think he's underrated. Tyrese Halliburton. Who do you think is underrated here in this first round, man? Because obviously, like I said, the star power here, it's pushing down some players that we typically draft a little bit higher.
I think Joel Embiid. It's got to be Joel Embiid. Per game basis, this man is top 3 every year. I get the injury concerns, but as I already stated, 5 through 12, you get all the same injury risk. One outlier, Jason Tatum, very durable, but he's also not that great of a fantasy performer. This guy hasn't finished in the top 12, I don't think, since ever. I don't think he's ever finished in the top 12. Well, Tatum, no. So Tatum,
you're talking about Tatum.
Yeah, he's never finished in the top 12, but he's always drafted that high because of his durability. But his stats, like he's never done it. So why is he still being drafted in the first round? Another argument for another day. Joel Embiid has at least shown the history of being the best on the court. And you insert Paul George in that situation, some might say, oh, that might be a risk to his fantasy value. I think it's a benefit. That's going to be an opportunity for him to not only boost his assists, because he can play more he can be more of a playmaker and not be as reliant on him to barrel down the lane and do some stupid shit, fall over himself and get injured. Like, he actually has a decent supporting cast now. Tyrese Maxey's an ascending talent that he can actually defer to and have trust in. That was the problem with Embiid. He couldn't trust anybody. You just paid $200+ million for Paul George. There's some trust there. So, and he lobbied for him on national television to come through, and he finally did. So, like, this was something that was working in the background. All things are going to be good for the Sixers, and the one thing that Embiid needs is to stay healthy. This is the year that he's going to play over 65 games, and if he does that with the usage rate that he's seen, with the production that he's provided over the years, he's underrated. He should be a top 5 pick, but he's going. I've seen him go 8. I've seen him go 10. He's sliding in drafts because everyone's scared of his health, Bill.
It's the injury risk, right? I think it's just built into our minds. We know he's going to get hurt, and you kind of start to see, like, Paul George is there. Maxey's taking longer, bigger role. It's like, it's easy to be like, the upside isn't there. And I think that's the one thing I see with Embiid that kind of has me on the opposite side there, where I kind of think he's starting to become a little overrated. Like, we know the scoring was there, and if the situation is ideal, that's fine. But, like, I feel like the risks associated with him kind of caps the ceiling. You know what I'm saying? Like, I feel like with this first, I think it does. I think the fact that the fact that he gets hurt, the fact that there's more scoring there now with Maxey, with Paul George, this ceiling ain't there. Plus, you're building in extra risk now. So you got other picks that are going way after him, to me, that are way better. You know what I'm saying? You smirk all you want, bro.
Per game basis, this man has not finished below 6th in the last 4 seasons. Hasn't finished below 6. And he's going to go 8, 9, 10. Y'all tripping.
I'm not taking him top 5.
Y'all tripping.
I ain't taking him top 5.
So you take Halliburton over him right now?
Oh, yeah. Taking Halliburton over.
You tripping.
Taking Halliburton. I just feel like when you build your team, and especially when we talk about, like, late in the season, fantasy playoffs and stuff, like, that stuff is etched into my mind. Like, obviously, the last weeks of the year are really what matters when it comes to building your team. And for a player who we know is probably going to miss time down the stretch, if they are a top 5 seed in the East, they are going to low manage down the stretch. That's a tough player to have towards the end of the season. Even if he finishes on the year as a top 5 guy, I want him in my lineup in the fantasy playoffs. And plus, the other thing here that we haven't really factored in is, like, he was chasing the MVPs over the last couple of years. But does he do that this year? You talked about trust with Paul George and with Maxey. We know Maxey is probably going to be leading this team at some point. They paid him to do so. They paid Paul George, like, I think some of that workload is going to have to shift. You don't think so?
I think the workload might shift, but I think we're still underrating the fact that he doesn't need to average 30 points a game to be that efficient of a basketball player.
That's a good point.
I don't know if you can hear that.
No, I can't hear nothing.
Literally got Blue Angels flying by my house right now.
Oh, that's dope though. Oh yeah, I can hear him now. Yo, that's loud. That's dope though.
It's just loud as hell. It's annoying as fuck. Like, now I gotta hit him up like, yo, bro, I'm on a podcast. Like, but nah, like, if you look at Embiid's numbers, man, like, he doesn't have to average 30 a game to still be the top 5 player. He can still average 28, get 12 rebounds a game with 4.5 assists, 5 assists, turnovers. That's still, like, an issue for him. But, like, he's one of the most efficient bigs. Like he's like a Karl Anthony Towns type guy in terms of, like, just his field goal percentage. He can stretch the floor with threes. He's an 80% plus three-point free throw shooter. I actually feel like it's just like at this point, yeah, his usage might suffer a little bit, but he's still going to put up numbers.
He's gonna put up numbers. The ceiling is the biggest concern that I have for him. Like, just how can he be a lock for a top 5? And I think there's so much risk built in there. But I get why you would say undervalued, because if things do work out, I mean, like you're talking about, just getting 80 plus on over 10 free throws a game, 88% free throw shooter, like that's definitely a luxury to have at the
last point to that.
Yeah.
Is he still going to be the offensive hub for the Sixers?
I think so the reason why I even have concerns is because I feel like the nights where he doesn't play, that they almost might manage his load a little bit more this season. Like, to avoid injuries, like there'll be games where they don't need him on the floor, kind of like what they did with Kawhi in LA, where it'll be Maxey and Paul George against some of the weaker teams taking over the offense, and they let Embiid rest. So I kind of like that's why I said I kind of understand your point about them taking the load in those games.
Yeah, and he doesn't. I mean, how many of those games last year did you see him, not even playing in the fourth quarter, and he already had 30 and 8, 30 and 12 and 5? You know what I'm saying? So we'll see how it shakes out. I just think that eventually, now that he has more of a supporting cast, that he's going to do less, but I think he can still be very efficient on a permanent basis.
Yeah, it's one of those situations you kind of got to determine your own risk in the first round here. And like you said, Embiid, man, he's been who he's been for the last few years. What about overrated though? You know what I'm saying? Like I thought Embiid was a little overrated, but the most overrated is different, Dan. And there's a couple players we probably could look at here. I think both you and I could probably find a few, and you touched on one earlier. You said his name. Do you think he's the most overrated player in the first round?
So, yeah, I think I mentioned it before, but I think I'm going to go a different direction. I think Tatum is overrated. If you look at Tatum's history of performance in fantasy, he's never been a top 12 guy, and yet he's consistently drafted there. So that's always just a red flag for me. I'm like, all right, do we just want this guy to be so he finished one time in the top 12, but yet he's always drafted in, I'm saying, that 5 to 8 range. My guy is the biggest riser into the first round, which is Anthony Edwards. And I ranked him number 10. And it's a bold ass ranking, bold as fuck ranking, because he hasn't finished better than what? Let me see real quick. Anthony Edwards hasn't finished better than like 35. Right. So to make a leap to first round value is insane.
It would take a lot.
It's going to take a lot. He's going to need to average more steals. He's going to need to be more efficient from the field. He's going to have to shoot like probably 47, 48%. He's going to have to get his points up to at least 28, 29, maybe even 30. But Karl Anthony Towns leaving, I think, opened the door for Ant to take on even more usage. And now with Julius Randle, definitely more of a playmaker than Karl Anthony Towns was. Yeah. This is the opportunity where I feel like Anthony Edwards could actually make that leap. Is it first round leap? Probably not. But again, I say fantasy basketball is fun. Anthony Edwards is a dog. He's going to be the face of the league soon enough. He's going to average 30 this year.
He's going to average 30. And I think that's the one thing you're hoping is like, but I think that's the problem. And I we don't always agree on stuff, Dan, but I agree with you here. Like, I think we're like forward thinking too much with Ant here, and we're forward thinking too much with this trade and how many doors are really going to be open for him scoring wise and usage wise this year. Because Julius Randle is a ball dominant player. It's not like he's let's facilitate and let's the offense doesn't.
He's not deferring.
He's not at all. The offense has to go through him. He's a bull when he gets the ball. He puts his head down and gets to the rim. Like that's just who Julius Randle is. So I think. I didn't understand this move from the Minnesota side. I get offloading like Cat and getting value, but like schematically, I didn't understand this move. So hopefully on the court, we'll see something different. But when it comes to Ant, like where is he going to excel this year? It's not like his field goal percentage is going to go up in a crazy way. It's not like his defensive stats are just going to go up in a crazy way. And I think the usage is probably going to bring more turnovers. So unless he ups his 3-ball too, and he's hitting 3 threes a game, I don't know if he hit 3 threes a game last season. I know it was close, but unless he's just changing a big part of his game, I just don't really see a path for Ant to be in the top 10. We have other players who are like on the verge of being top 10 that I think can outproduce him.
So I think the biggest place where I think I mentioned it a minute ago, but if he could get up to 1.6 to 2 steals a game, he's going to be with the numbers he was putting up last year, he could be very close to second round value and potentially push for first round, because that's what Donovan Mitchell did last year. Donovan Mitchell was a top 12 player because he averaged 1.8 steals. He's never done that before. With all those efficiency, I mean, he shot 46%. That's not great. You know what I mean? So he's going to have to 3-ball steals. If he can get that and up to, 25 to 30 points a game, it's possible, but I think unlikely.
Unlikely, man. And I think that's the problem with it. It's just like sometimes you buy into the player before it happens. You want to be first to the market. And I think I honestly think that's what it is with AE. And I think a player that we've always drafted too, Dan, on the kind of an older player, not even old. It's funny. They asked his teammates, they were like, are you old now? Or are you not old? Giannis is 29, but it feels like he's obviously been in the league forever. Yeah. I think he's a little overrated this year. And we know what he provides. Like, we know the floor. We even seen it with Dame last year. And obviously Doc, they change things around. And Doc normally gets a lot out of his superstars. But I think what Giannis, his flaws dip into a little bit of his value, right? When you talk about now you're giving some of the scoring away to Lillard, but he doesn't really shoot threes at a high clip, turns the ball over a lot. And we kind of know his stat line is capped in essence, right? Obviously going to dominate in field goal percentage. I just think the floors where he hurts you, he's a high volume free throw shooter in category leagues. I think he plummets that on a weekly basis. And then, like I said, I just know we know the turnovers are there, and the defensive stats don't do enough for me in order to offset those turnover risks. So for me, I kind of think Giannis, who goes as like a top 5 to 8 type range player, I think he belongs more at the back end of the first, or maybe the high in the second round. It's the name value that kind of carries him, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, 2 years ago, Giannis was 110th in per game value in fantasy. Last year, he made this substantial climb back up, but he was at best 34th.
Man.
So I think it's the flaws and the warts in his game that it just makes it more difficult to build around him, right? Like, you want to build off balance. Like, balance is key in fantasy basketball, especially in category leagues. And if you're already going into your draft after your first pick being severely deficient in free throw percentage, and he's not really getting you that many stocks, like, I mean, his numbers are like, you're not going to draft like Giannis is a first round pick talent wise because he gets 30 and 10 and 5. But you gotta figure out how to build up that free throw percentage, or do you punt it? And I think once you get into the conversation of punting, fantasy drafting just gets much harder. And it's definitely a strategy to try, but you know what I'm saying? Like, I'd rather not have to go through that exercise.
Yeah,
like,
give me 9-0. I'm not trying to go 7-2. Find a way to go 7-2, because there's going to be other teams that compete in the categories you have. And punting is tough. I know there's a lot of people that advocate for punting, but for me, I never found value in that, because you can also, there's other teams have weaknesses too. And so in order to build a complete roster, you can't go into a match knowing you're already going to lose a category or two. It just does not make sense to me.
That doesn't make sense.
You have to win 5. So out of those 2 you punt, you at least that you can't lose 2 more. Or you can't lose 3 more. So I've never understood punting. For me, I try to find balance, but you draft Giannis, you're for sure punting free throws. Like, the volume that he shoots and the percentage he shoots, it puts you at a disadvantage every week. Do you think Giannis's value is affected by points league? Because I think in a points league, now we're taking Giannis a little bit earlier, and that's a bigger conversation, I think, to have. Do you think that points league value sometimes, and even if you're drafting in points leagues, category value, right? If you're drafting in the points leagues, do you think that there's 2 varying formats affect the ADP of each other?
There's probably, I think on Yahoo, there's an even distribution of like points leagues and category leagues guys, but like, I honestly feel like it's the name notoriety that's carrying his fantasy stock. Like, I don't think it's format specific. I think it's just like, Giannis is like a perennial all-star, all-NBA player, former champion, monster on the court. But like, I think that,
but we don't see like LeBron. We don't see LeBron up here in the top 10. You know what I mean? Like, there's
true. That's true.
It's weird because
I think that's like ageism a little bit. Like, I feel like, they're like, Bron, and Bron's still doing it. When's Father Time gonna catch up? Whereas like Giannis is 29, and like, for the most part, he's been pretty healthy. But I don't know, man. Like, I feel you. Like, 61% from the line last year on how many free throw attempts? I mean, 11 free throw attempts a game.
That tanks you.
That's brutal. That's like, you can't. That's just such you're putting yourself in such a hole that to be honest, like maybe it's a hot take, but like I feel like that pushes Giannis to like a second rounder type of guy, like because he's not the person you want to build around.
It's tough, man. And like I said, I just think with all the talent that's in the league right now, there's no need to draft a player who is going to kill you on one category in the first round. Maybe you take him in the second. You've already established kind of a firm dominance in like maybe some of these categories or other categories, and you want to balance this thing out. And you're like, oh, Giannis, at least he gives me scoring and rebounding. Like I would take that in the second round, and I still even think there might be some talent around there I'd rather take. But
yeah, so
at least it's a strategy though.
To go back to the punting for a second, like pairing Giannis with Domantas Sabonis makes a ton of sense.
Yes,
stat stuffing wise, but again, if through 2 rounds you are really bad at free throws and you get no stocks, like you're putting yourself in. Like it looks good statistically, you're getting a whole bunch of counting stats, but I don't know, man. I just feel like it just makes your ability to compete with the whole league a little bit tougher. You got to hit all your draft picks when you're drafting Giannis in that kind of format.
The name value. Sometimes the name value does a lot, Dan. And, you know, when you look outside of like the ADP, sometimes you can find value. I think, you know, I mean, like I think that's one of the more undervalued things is how to know who's going to be the next emerging player. And people often do it with star power. We talked about Anthony Edwards being like the next player up and go in the top 10. Who's a player outside of the top 12 in ADP right now who you think has a real shot of being like a top 5 player, not just entering the first round, but like in top 5 asset and fantasy and category leagues?
For me, I think it's Karl Anthony Towns. From what I've seen just in the couple preseason games, he didn't shoot particularly well last game, but I think there's just an enormous opportunity for him to be the cat of Minnesota when he was playing under Tom Thibodeau. And if you look at those numbers, he was an all-NBA player. It was his first time being an all-star. He was averaging over 12 rebounds a game, still shooting over 50% from the field, bombing from threes, still shooting efficiently there. Now that he's not having a rim protector to play alongside of him, because I mean, Cat was largely a stretch 4 in Minnesota. He's going to be playing the 5 with Mitchell Robinson out. So that now that he's getting his rebounding and potentially some blocks back to his fantasy profile, I mean, he was a top 12 player 3 years ago before Rudy got there.
I mean, we were drafting him like as a top 5 guy.
Yeah. And I think he's going to probably get back to that. And I know that there's a lot of usage to go around in New York, but he's going to be the second option on offense. So with the way his skill set is, he can play pick and pop. He can run the screen and roll, obviously knock down 3-point shooter. With that efficiency and now his ability to get stocks and boards again, I'm back in on Karl.
Yeah, it's a really good point, man, because he's an efficient player. Like for the most part, Cat's a pretty efficient player. And in this offense, there's going to be less defensive eyes on him. And I think the stench is kind of on Cat because for a while there, he was really injury prone. And then, like you mentioned, the defensive stuff kind of went away once Rudy got there. So it's like we have this thought, and then obviously like the off court stuff with Cat. And after all that, you know, there's the fun stuff with Cat too. But like you're getting a motivated Cat, a guy who was dedicated, it seemed like, to Minnesota, and they kind of did him dirty. So now playing for championship aspirations on this New York Knicks team around a lot of talent too, it's going to make things easier on Canton. Like you mentioned, as we've seen already in the preseason, he's been tearing shit up. So I think this, like, it's weird because I think some players, we get this like in our heads, we build up this image about them and it kind of catapults their value down. I think Kyrie Irving is another example of this, a player who like the off court stuff kind of like makes their fantasy value go down, even though for the most part, like a Kyrie type guy is always top 15 on a per game basis. So yeah. I think Cat is the same thing where like on a per game basis, we can expect a bigger output. I really love, I think that's a really good pick. And he's going it looks like 20, like mid 20s.
Yeah, he's going, where's Cat going? Cat's going 20. His ADP is moving up. It was 26 to start the season.
Game, I bet it is.
Now it's 21. So I think we're going to continue to see that move closer to like that mid-second round.
Another player that I think is truly underrated and has an opportunity here. It's, you know, this is one of them J-Hen picks, man. And for whatever reason, I go to the guys that are like, I talk outliers. And Chet Holmgren to me has all the upside of like a top 5 guy due to like an efficient player at the big spot that'll hit a 3, blocking a ton of shots. Like, he gives you a ton of value, and maybe it's not Wembanyama, and he's not the caliber of player of Wemby. But to me, I get a more efficient version and maybe a dialed back version on some of the counting stats. And to me, I think an increased role is coming for Chet Holmgren. You talked about Shea earlier on the pod, said, kind of deferring to some of these other options. I think one of the main beneficiaries of this is Chet Holmgren. And if we can get an increased output offensively, if he can find more of a role for himself, we get an increase in threes, even more efficiency than we did last year from the stripe. Like, I think that there's a world where Chet Holmgren can be in this top 5 category just based purely off of efficiency. And yeah, we won't get 20. I'm not expecting 25 and 10. Like, that's not what I'm saying. But I think Chet Holmgren, like right now, being a 3rd round pick or back end 2nd round, if you're, in a deeper league, to me is a little bit wild. I think he belongs more in this 2nd round category than the 3rd round discussion. And in your leagues, I think there's somebody that probably thinks like me. And the craziest stack of all time would probably be like a Wemby Chet stack. That might have you set up for the whole year, Brad.
It could it could happen because I think, Chet's ADP is definitely creeping more towards the back of the 2nd round, like mid to late 2nd. So I had Chet as like number 15, I think, on my board when I first came out with my rankings. And I was like very solid on it. Like, all right, this dude is just a fantasy, like he's one of those fantasy players that you want to, he'll just be efficient. He'll get blocks. He'll take that natural progression and go up in a second NBA season. My one concern about him, though, is like, are we valuing his blocks too high? Like, if he doesn't block 2 shots a game, 2.3 blocks a game, where does that put him? I think he kind of becomes like an Evan Mobley type, where it's like, oh, he's like a third round guy. But if he can sustain his block rate or potentially go up even more, yeah, he's going to be a 1st round player. Like, he was top 20 last year. And that was a rookie season where he was just still kind of figuring it out. Well, now he's got a full offseason. The team got better. Like, it's only going up for everybody on the Thunder. And you know what I'm saying? Like, I think if he could get up to 18 points a game, still maintain over 2 blocks, yeah, he's going to be in that 1st round conversation for sure.
I love it because I feel like that Isaiah Hartenstein kind of allows him to do that, roam a little bit more. He doesn't have to worry as much about on the rebounding side. Like, now you get to play a little bit more loosely on the defensive end. And I see your point, though, because if he doesn't get those blocks, it's not like he can be supported by like, a heavy point total or really anything else. It's like that is the thing that is carrying his value a little bit. I don't know. I still feel like out of him, I feel like the upside is still there. He's another year removed from the Liz Frank injury. And I feel like that was one of the things coming in was like, I think he had a minutes restriction to start the year off last year, and then it kind of built up. So I think that's the one thing is if he is the guy for them, if he is the one that takes the lead, because there's a few of them, there's a few dogs on that team. If he's the one that takes the lead, I think top 5 is like the floor for him.
So one person that I think I'd compare him to is Jaren Jackson Jr. Because Jaren Jackson Jr., not a great rebounder, but he's like, okay, decent scorer, right? But his block just putting him on a whole nother fucking plateau. Yeah. And if he gets the blocks, he's going to be right in that conversation. If he doesn't get the blocks, he's going to fall. And you're going to, oh shit, why did I take this guy that high? But I still think he's going to be solid, but we'll see. I like that.
Chet didn't get that, or not Chet, Jaren Jackson didn't get that last year, and we saw his value take a major hit.
Mm-hmm. And he still got better in other areas because of all the injuries, but the blocks didn't hit. But that's like actually like to your point of like bringing in Hartenstein. I actually feel like that's going to be a good thing for the Memphis Grizzlies too, that they got a big man now, because I think some of these stretch 4 mold archetype type guys are going to be even better when they have like an anchor center, because they can just get those chase down blocks. They can get the perimeter shots. They're like 7 feet tall going to contest a 3-pointer by like Steph Curry. Like, they're going to get some blocks there. So I think when they give someone like Chet is going to benefit being in like a safety type role where he can kind of roam around, not being close to the rim all the time.
The discount Wemby, get him while you can in the 2nd round. But listen, obviously we talked about players outside the top 12. How do you think the 1st round should go? If you're just going, all right, these are my top guys, and I don't care how crazy it is, bro, because everybody's going to have their own top 12. But let me hear your 1st round and how it should go.
I mean, you're kind of getting me in the mode of moving Giannis out the 1st round, but I'm not going to do it quite yet. 1st overall has got to be Wemby. 2nd, Jokic. Luka 3rd. SGA 4th. Embiid 5th, Anthony Davis 6, Halliburton 7, Tatum 8, Trae Young 9, Anthony Edwards 10, James Harden 11, and I feel like I'm forgetting someone. And I'm gonna go. Oof.
Yeah, now it gets to that Giannis, Steph, D. Mitch.
I think I'm gonna go Giannis 12.
So we're agreed on the 1 and the 2. I think you said Shea third too, or you said Luka third?
Luka third.
Yeah, and you had Shea fourth. All right. So we're agreed on the 1 and 2. So my number 1 is Wemby. Second, I'm going with Jokic. Third, I'm going with Shea. Fourth, I got Tyrese Halliburton here on the fourth. The fourth pick. Luka fifth. And I kind of don't like that Luka pick, but I think the just the novelty of I have to show respect to him. I don't like taking Luka there. But Luka fifth. Sixth, I got AD, Anthony Davis.
Agreed there.
Seventh, I got Embiid. Eighth, I got Anthony Edwards. Ninth, I got Chet. Yeah, we can get up there. 10th, I got Tatum. 11th, I got Harden. 12th, I got Trae.
Okay.
The one name that you and I both had in there that might surprise some people is Trae Young. Like, you had him up really high, higher than most. And then, like, I feel like I probably, I don't know if he's even going in the first round right now. But Trae Young, man, talk about why you have him ranked a little higher.
Yeah, so Trae's right now, his ADP is just moving out of the first round. And I don't know why that is going that direction. I actually feel it should be going up. With DeJounte Murray out there, like, I think we're going to be seeing potentially a 30% usage rate with Trae. And I think it's the pieces that fit around him. Offensively, like, he's never had trouble getting his shot off, right? So the points, we already got that locked down. I'm more encouraged by what he can do in the assists and potentially on defense too. Now that you don't have, like, DeJounte Murray was playing various roles for that team. He was their defensive stopper, their point of attack defender. And Trae Young's not a good defender, but that doesn't mean that he can't get steals. Allen Iverson wasn't a good defender, but he was, always getting 1.5 steals per game. So I think there's going to be lanes and opportunities, just given the length and size that Atlanta prioritized, that Trae's going to get some definitely some benefits of, some loose balls, steals, whatever. But really the centers around, I don't think there's any other person in the league that can average 25 points with 10 assists. Shoot maybe threes. Luka. Who?
Maybe Luka.
Yeah, maybe Luka. That's true. Luka and Jokic probably could too. Yeah. But so point guard. Yeah, Luka's the only other one that could probably do that. And if you're looking at that volume and that opportunity, to me, like, there's only a handful of players that have that. So to me, he has to be a first round pick. Fred VanVleet has been a very good fantasy player, even though he doesn't shoot a good field goal percentage. So, like, don't let that deter you from Trae Young. He does other things really well. And I think this is going to be one of those years. It's going to be a pivotal year for him because the Atlanta Hawks are, like, in that weird spot of, like, are we rebuilding? Are we not? Are we competing? Are we not? We got bad contracts. He could request a trade tomorrow, and I wouldn't be surprised. So this is about to be raising his stock, putting himself in the best position to either get Atlanta to win or increase his trade value so that he can, go play with a contender.
If you are on a losing team, which the Hawks will probably be a losing team again this year, it's all about your numbers at that point. And there's a post he made. He said about this year was about staying healthy. Only played 54 games last year. He said this year was about staying on the floor, making himself available, and that was a big focus for him. And I think the one thing with Trae Young is that he has, like, outlier potential this year. I'm not saying that he gets there, but he has that potential when it comes to his three ball. Like Steph Curry, obviously, with the 4 threes a game, like, that's what we want. If you're gonna take a chance on threes early, that's what you want. And so when you get that paired with 10 assists, even if the field goal percentage isn't great, it's like now this team is going. We know for sure this team is counting on Trae Young to be their guy. Potentially a 30-point scorer, potentially more shots, more usage, like you mentioned. I think the upside is there. And I think the one hit you have to take is at the defensive stats and at the field goal percentage. But it's not so much to where it's an anchor for your team, where you have to punt the category. Maybe if the field goal percentage drops a little too low. But we've seen Trae Young be a 45, 46% guy in the past before DeJounte Murray got there. So maybe they're playing a little bit more to his strengths. Maybe he's taking better shots. But I do agree. I think Trae Young might be a little undervalued right now because of what we've seen over the last couple of years.
2 years ago, when he played 76 games, 11th in per game value. shot 46% from the field, 90% from the line, hit 3 threes a game. And this was before he was even averaging, the last couple seasons, he's averaged over a steal per game. He was at to 1.3 last year. You combine all that together, I think that they know, like, all right, Trae was at his best when he didn't have this like usage to share with another point guard, combo guard. So it's about to be wheels up for Trae.
It's like he doesn't have to pick his spots. Like the offense goes through him for better or for worse. It's not like, oh, should I defer right now? Am I the guy right now? He clearly will know what his role is this season, which I think is a good thing for him. Another player that's kind of in here that we both have in our top 12 that a lot of people might be like, huh? Especially if you haven't been consuming a lot of basketball content this year, James Harden. You know, obviously getting older. Last year we were getting him in like 4th, 5th round value at a steal when he had all this shit going on with the Sixers. Now we both have him in our top 12. Talk to me why you got him in your top 12, man.
I think it starts with Kawhi Leonard and it ends with Paul George. Paul George is out of there, and Kawhi Leonard already is telling us that, yo, I got off-season surgery on my knee. I got to get load managed. He just played, 70 games, or what did he play, 68 or 70 games? I think he made 68 games, something like that.
Felt like a full season for him.
Facts. You know what I'm saying? So, like, the fact that he's already saying, like, yo, man, I'm trying to play for the playoffs. I don't even know if the Clippers are going to make it to the playoffs. If you look at their roster up top to bottom, very uninspiring. So, like, to me, the only players that I'm really looking at in fantasy right now, James Harden and Ivica Zubac. And James Harden hasn't averaged, I think he averaged his lowest points per game since the 2016-2017 season when he was a 6th man. He's going to have to up that scoring load because this team they don't have enough scores. Terrence Mann, nah. Norman Powell will have his spots, but like who else is really going to contribute outside of him and Kawhi? So I think this is going to be an opportunity for you. I mean, you could get a 20-10 potential guy in the 2nd round right now. Like we have him as 1st round grades because I think he's going to be one of the few guys that can put up, those type of first round caliber numbers. But he's going to get a steal. Similar to Trae, his field goal percentage might suffer, but you're going to make it up in his high free throw percentage, the volume that he has in free throws, and as well as the assists and the threes. So, yeah, I think it's going to be a nice season that you can get Harden at a pretty good discount considering that he has the capability, just given the usage and the opportunity to be a top, 1st round pick.
Well, the money talks. It's like you don't pay Paul George, and you pay James Harden. You let Russell Westbrook go. And that's another scorer that like kind of took on that superstar role for this Clipper team. Now, you mix that in with Kawhi missing games, and that's a lot of scoring that's going to be on James Harden's shoulders. And the last time we've seen him with that much responsibility, we know he's a 30-point guy. I don't know if he quite gets to 30. I think that's a big ask for a player that's probably in the middle end to back end of his career. But when James Harden is the guy and he's taking the volume of shots that he does, it's not like he can't hit shots anymore. It's not like he can't play. It's the teams haven't needed him to be this. And I think just looking at some of his usage in the preseason, we got him doing the fake pump fake step backs. Like it looks like the creative James Harden is back and the one that knows, okay, this offense runs through me. You got guys like Derek Jones Jr. and Norman Powell. And it's like the supporting pieces. It's not like there's a ton of it's not like there's a ton of supporting scoring pieces on this team. So if this team is going to be a playoff team or have playoff aspirations, if they're going to put up 105 points a game, Harden's got to score damn near 30 a game in order to do that. So unless Kawhi is available for 80 games this year, I really don't see a world where James Harden isn't just this big usage monster that helps dominate with our teams. And we know he's an elite free throw guy. Yeah, the turnovers are going to be there, but steals are often up with James Harden. Like, I think there's a lot to like with Harden in the 1st round.
Yeah, I think it's okay to assume he's going to get back to like, 21, 22 points per game. We're not going to get to like, prime MVP, 27.
You don't think there's a world where he gets like 25 a game, 27 a game?
Maybe if it feels like a stretch. I mean, he hasn't done that since what? 2019
when he was with the with the Rockets or with the Nets. With the Nets, he was with Kyrie. He with Kyrie and KD.
He was sharing,
he's sharing in Philly with Embiid, and it's like this is the one time we get to see him. Like,
I feel you. 25 is not crazy. If the workload is going to be what we're assuming, and there's not that much scoring opportunities outside of him and Kawhi, then yeah, he's probably going to need to get at least 25. Can he get 30? Awesome, but like I don't. 25 seems like the maximum that I think we're going to see for him. And I misspoke earlier. I think he hasn't scored. His 16 points per game was his lowest since 2011. So, you know what I'm saying? That seems like an outlier though, right? Like his scoring has been trending down, but it's also trending down because of the players that he was playing with.
I'm thinking like
He was
this.
in a different role.
If he doesn't score 25 a game, how does this Clipper team win more than like 15 to 20 games?
I mean, that's the one problem that I have is like, if they're not good, is his hammy going to come up? You know what I'm saying? A little bit troublesome. He's going to have a sprained ankle.
Especially late in the year too.
I feel like Ballmer talked to him about this. Like, we got a new stadium. We got to get fans in the stadium. I need y'all to like be present in this. But it wouldn't surprise me if they're not good that, you know, some kind of injury kind of pops up for Harden at some point in the season.
Well, hopefully not, man. Hopefully you draft him in the first round and he kills it for your fantasy team, man. The first round, full of a lot, especially at the top. It's very top heavy, it feels like, but full of star power and full of some question marks at the positions. But hopefully we gave you guys some insight on the first round. We'll be back to talk about other rounds later. Peace out.